Thanks for tech. The GoPro Hero 11 has the most amount of pixels in any GoPro yet, and it is hailed by many time-lapse photographers as the best GoPro for time-lapses yet. In my previous video, I talked about why I personally shoot my time-lapses and hyperlapses in the video mode, but in today's video I wanted to talk about the GoPro RAW files or the .GPR files that come out of this camera and why they are good or bad depending on how you look at it. A GPR file is a general purpose RAW file, and I've linked a great resource below on GitHub which explains how these files work and why they exist. Now, of course, traditionally for time-lapse photography we shoot RAW files, which gives us more latitude in post-production to change our white balance, our highlights, our shadows and our exposure, etc., which comes in extremely handy when you're shooting Holy Grail time-lapses. Now, let's go over the pros and cons of shooting .GPR files on the GoPro, and then at the end we'll have a look at how I'll be shooting in the future. Firstly, the maximum resolution of the sensor. We are getting 5568 by 4872 pixels in this RAW photo mode. In some of the video modes, you get fewer pixels. We want to use all the information that we have on the sensor, so that's a fair point for shooting photos instead of video. Secondly, you can perform non-destructive edits to the white balance. With a JPEG or in a video file, if you change your white balance, it's not a true actual change of the white balance. It's just adding or subtracting colors from that footage. With these RAW files, you can actually manipulate the white balance as if you were doing it on the spot. So it's non-destructive and it's extremely handy if you want to ramp your white balance from daytime to nighttime if you're shooting a cityscape sunset, for example. You also have much more room to play with your exposure in post compared to JPEGs or video, so you can recover more highlights, you can lift your shadows better, you can add or subtract more exposure on these images compared to the compressed formats. This is good if you want to have the maximum amount of control over your footage in post, which is what most of us, I assume, are looking to do when we're creating high-end time-lapses. But then again, if you're creating high-end time-lapses, why are you shooting on a GoPro? Now let's have a look at the cons. Because you're using the complete sensor and all that data, you just get the full lens fisheye look, which you need to fix in post, which leads to stretching your footage, losing a bit of resolution and losing a bit of sharpness in certain areas of the image. Depending on your settings, you'll get much noisier footage, which is harder to remove from these photos compared to getting a clean video file with not much noise in at all. I recommend shooting at ISO max 200, by the way, which will extend your exposure, but even then, some RAW files are just notoriously difficult to remove the noise from. These GPR files, compared to normal RAW files, are much slower to edit in LR timelapse, which is what I assume you'll be doing if you're doing this high-end Holy Grail kind of stuff. This is because, according to Gunther, the developer of LR timelapse, GPR files aren't true RAW files. I haven't found much more information about why that is, but one reason is that there's not an embedded JPEG in that GPR file. Truth of the matter is, it just takes longer to edit these GPR files compared to the video files that you get out of it, or compared to normal RAW files. The GPR files are much bigger in size. They're not massive compared to a big, Canon R5 RAW file, but they are about 11 to 12 megabytes per photo, versus the JPEGs are about 6 megabytes per photo. Now, of course, this has pros with it as well. There's more data in there for you to edit, so you can have your smooth ramping and exposure and white balance changes because they're RAW files. But if you're going for file efficiency, I'm still going to go with the video shooting, because if you're really chasing the highest possible quality of a shot, you wouldn't be shooting on your GoPro. So I hope that kind of balances things out. Conclusion for me, I don't see a reason for me personally to be shooting RAW files on this unless it's specifically for like a tutorial or to prove a point. I'm still very happy with the performance of the video files, as I spoke about in my previous videos, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you tried editing RAW GoPro files or .GPR files? Also, really recommend that you read that article or that GitHub post that I linked below, because it just gives you a nice insight as to why that format exists on the GoPro and the way it exists. Anyways, to conclude, if you want the maximum resolution and the maximum flexibility in post-production, then go ahead with the GPR files. I'm gonna keep going on my video files just because that's what I've decided to do. Hope you enjoyed this other little Hero 11 video. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for videos, drop them down below. Happy holidays. May the clouds be in your favor. Bye bye.